Last week, I was at a family gathering with some extended family, and it was really fun. We were a mixture of people, and the youth gathering came into conversation. So one woman was from Alaska, and she knew how many people from that area were coming. Another woman was from out east, and she had some stories of them coming. My niece was at the last youth gathering, and she said, "Oh, I remember how exciting it was when they announced where this one was going to be." It was a topic. They planned for over a year, right? Tina's up there, that's who I'm shaking my head with. Packed their bags, went together, and of course, you got to hear the great stories, and they'll share more great ones. But there are some stories of things that didn't quite go as planned. One of the groups from out east got to the airport to find out that most of the group's flight reservations got lost in the system. And Tina and 3 buses full of kids, 5 buses full of kids, arrived in Oklahoma to find out that their hotel reservations were lost in the system. So the kids got to experience a unique hotel in replacement for the one they thought they were going to stay in. Each time those events happen, you're dependent on the help and hospitality of others. You can't just drive down the street and put 5 buses of kids in the next place you find. You need help. In college, I went on a concert band tour. We played in congregations. We went to the West Coast and back through Canada. We played in Lutheran churches on this trip. I had gone to Waldorf College out of Iowa. It's a small church college. The first day, we're driving along, and the trailer carrying all of our instruments broke down. So we swapped out our luggage for our instruments so we could still do the concert that night, and can you guess what happens? We didn't see our luggage that night, or the next night. We had hoped to be reunited, but repairs took much longer than they had anticipated. Most people didn't even have a clean toothbrush, let alone clean clothes. At the home that I stayed with and the group, the woman offered to wash our clothes, which was very kind of her. It meant she had stayed up after we had gotten there, which is late, and after we had chatted for a while. And she offered us her own clothes, including a pair of her own underwear so she could wash ours so we could have a clean pair for the next day. As we climbed on the bus the next day, people shared their stories. Our group had some kind of humbling but wonderful hospitality. Others said they uncomfortably opened the bathroom drawers to find a brush or a comb, and a few brave students helped themselves to a squirt of deodorant for the day. The charter bus made a stop at Walmart to buy some daily necessities. Those moments of relying on others for what you need can be stressful, especially for the adults, right? But they can create some laughter and some pretty good pictures. Can you imagine a bus full of college kids holding up their brand new underwear? I have that picture. In church, we often think about hospitality as something we provide for others. In fact, the last time I was here, do you remember, some of you know the story, there were people across the street doing their community service, and a few eager people who didn't want to hear my sermon volunteered to walk across the street to see if they were still there. And because you guys always have goodies here, not always waffles, but cookies, I asked if they were still there, if cookies could be delivered to them. I couldn't tell during worship if it had worked to deliver things or not, but I found out that it all came together. I also found out that they were kind of hesitant to take some cookies. I mean, they're just cookies. But I'm sure it was a humbling experience for someone else to look them in the eye and to realize that someone else saw their face and knew that they were putting some hard work into paying for some challenging times. One woman walked out and she shared with me, you know what? Today we gave our first fruits to others. Others had received the goodies before the congregation. It was cool. Jesus talks about hospitality to his disciples, but it's not how they would be welcoming to others. Jesus told his disciples to go and be dependent on the hospitality of others. Now, at that time, fast food or any type of place to buy food was very rare. So travelers had to depend on the kindness of others. Whether they knew the person or not, they would ask for food and other things. Now they were to take a staff and wear sandals, translation, plan to do some walking. You see, already in this passage, Jesus is saying, my message and my healing and my love is not just for this close-knit group, it's for all people. And it's going to take a lot of walking to get to all people. They were not to take anything else. They were to visit people who were not expecting them, nor did they know that they were disciples. And if they had heard about Jesus, it's not really clear what they had heard or what they would think. I mean, in his own hometown, people weren't very excited about Jesus, and there were lots of rumors going around about who he was and what he was up to. You know, I admire the strength of religious people who knock on the door of strangers to have a faith conversation. But I don't know if I could really muster up the strength and my comfort level to not only knock to ask about a conversation about Jesus, but also ask for food, clothing, and a warm, dry place to sleep. So, what would it be like for this congregation to launch a ministry of depending on the hospitality of others? Can you imagine the talk? Oh, come on. You know, I know summers get a little financially tight, but we do not need to be knocking on our neighbors' doors. We can take care of ourselves. What kind of message would that send if we were asking other people to take care of us? I mean, really, would it even matter if someone said, well, Jesus told his disciples to do it? Okay, Jesus is not like the person who jumps off the bridge, right? Do you think anyone would join in for a long time, depend on the other ministry program? I'm sure the reactions would range from disbelief to discomfort. There might even be a group of people who would gather somewhere for a meeting and say, whoever started this needs a little conversation. Who should go and talk to them? People would have to be honest about their needs. Snoring would seem like a simple conversation compared to telling someone what your clothes size and if you needed any other particular things to survive. Sharing such things, even among those planning this ministry, would be very humbling, let alone going out and telling strangers. Friday, I dropped off some items at the secondhand store in Hastings, and I didn't just leave. I typically do some shopping at the secondhand stores. It's an adventure. Funds there go towards the needs of others in the community. There was a younger woman with an older man, and I could kind of tell they didn't know each other really well, and they were dressed very differently. She was trying to help him find a pair of shoes. Another man came in and said that the shirt that he was given didn't fit and he wanted to be able to return it. You see, those in need can receive clothing. A man asked if there were backpacks, and the very busy volunteer said, yes, over there. And since I'd already been there for a while, I knew exactly which bin the backpacks were in, so I pointed it out to him. He had checked out and left, yes, before I had left, and shortly came back to return the shopping bag. I said, oh, you can keep that. He said, well, I put everything in my backpack, and so I don't need it, so I thought I'd return it back to you. Do you hear the humility, but also the sense of generosity? The man who was given the shirt had gone somewhere, tried it on, it didn't work, brought it back. The man who had the backpack brought the sack back, didn't just throw it in the garbage outside. It reminds me of a time when I went with my son to deliver items with other kids in the inner city. And it was a really hot day, and we ran out of water bottles. We gave our last one to a woman in a wheelchair. And a man came up and said, do you have any more water bottles? And we're like, oh, I'm really sorry. We've given them all out. And the woman in the wheelchair said, I actually have one that I had already, so you can have mine. Now, Jesus didn't sit down with a big plan about this ministry of dependence on others. He didn't have everything written out in a nice folder for those who had bought into his plan to sit down for a training session to explain the purpose for all of the things he was asking them to do. So it's hard for us to know exactly what Jesus was intending by telling them to go and take nothing and to just be dependent on the hospitality of others. The purpose of Jesus' instructions to the disciples could be endless. It was an opportunity to have appreciation for the everyday things. It allowed the disciples to not be bogged down with stuff and plans. Just think of how much time you would have if you had half the amount of stuff that you do. Or how much time I would have if I carried around half the amount of stuff that I do. Being vulnerable can open oneself up to seeing and being gracious to the vulnerability of others. And even though he sent people out in groups of 2, depending on a stranger, literally depending on them, would make the disciples experience the need of community. And the sense that God had created more than just themselves. God had created all these people to support ministry, to support their sense of God calling them into the world. They may have been able to understand the importance of being present in the moment, not having to worry about their things. They could truly engage in the conversations. They could have eye contact with a person. They could sit and just soak in the moment of that relationship at that time. Being dependent on others as a ministry. Being dependent on the hospitality and generosity of others as part of a faith community. I wonder if Jesus may have been asking them to do that so they could see God's abundant hospitality. God's abundant hospitality in a way they had never experienced God's hospitality before.